You are listening to part 5 of our 8-part series, Bountiful Beans, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I hope that you're enjoying your life.
I am. Been a fun summer.
I'm so glad to hear that, for me as well. And I hope that your summer has had lots of beans in it. The summer, of course, is one of the times that we think of beans, especially green beans, but all kinds of other beans, especially if you're at a, shall we say, a socially conscious cookout. You're probably going to be offered a choice between a regular hamburger and, say, a soy burger or a veggie burger, or maybe even a piece of tofu that's been grilled. So we're going to talk this week about soybeans, sometimes called the queen of the beans. And we're going to continue this month with a variety of really interesting beans. You remember last month we looked at beans more generally. We looked at origin stories of beans and in general how beans are healthy for us. And we talked about green beans and shelled beans and about lentils and peas, some of the most important kinds of beans. Well, this month, soybeans, chickpeas, fava beans, and then the medicinal beans, astragalus, red clover, fenugreek, and a few what I call crazy beans, including peanuts, carob, mimosa, and mesquite. So let's get started and look at soybeans. Are they healthy? Are they a hype? Are they a hoax? What is going on with soybeans? Well, let's see if we can just start with the facts. And it's certainly absolutely true that soybeans appear to be incredibly nutritious, containing vitamin B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, B5, B6, vitamin E, vitamin K, beta-carotenes, biotin, folic acid. Those are also factors of B vitamins, calcium, copper, iodine, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, zinc. And, of course, like all beans, fiber, protein, complex carbohydrates, and omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids, lecithins, isoflavones, phytic acids, saponins, and protease inhibitors. Sounds really good on paper. Now, we've mentioned, but let me really bring this point home, that beans, like all seeds, contain groups of substances that act in mammals to interfere with nutrition. This is a really smart move on the parts of seeds. Seeds are, after all, the little babies of the plants waiting to grow up into the next plants. And the plants are not making seeds so that humans can come around and say, oh, yum, yum, I'm going to eat those seeds, I'm going to eat those beans. So the plants protect their seeds by putting a variety of things, phytates, phytic acid, a bunch of different things into their seeds that actually lock into needed nutrients and prevent us from either absorbing them or being able to make use of them once we've absorbed them. And soy is exceptional in this regard, in that most seeds, we can trick them up to get rid of these substances, soaking seeds overnight and pouring away. The soaking water is one of the classic ways to do this. Whenever I talk about these anti-nutritional substances, I always remember a student from, oh my goodness, maybe 35 or 40 years ago. And it was the second time I had visited her community. And I believe I was speaking at a place of worship, a church. And this woman came at me very, very red-faced and very angry and soundly denounced me because at a previous talk I had talked about the benefits of whole grains and how important it was to eat whole grains, brown rice rather than white rice, and whole wheat rather than partial wheat. And she laid into me about these anti-nutritional substances and that these were horrible things. And they are indeed. And the take-home point here is that we can't get rid of them from soy simply by soaking soy and pouring off the water. As a matter of fact, it's a little unknown as to whether or not there's any way to clear these substances from soy except by fermenting it. And that means making it into miso or tamari. The number of things that we can do with soy is certainly one of the things that people call out about in its favor. Soy is widely used as animal feed because it is close to 50% protein as well as being high in fat. But for human consumption, we can eat immature green soybeans boiled in their pods. That's called edamame. We can eat soybean sprouts. We can soak and grind and soak and leach in water soybeans and make a white cloudy liquid out of it that we can drink. We can turn soybeans into infant formula. We can press them into soy oil. We can make soy flour. We can extract the lecithin from the soy oil and use that in a wide variety of foods. We can make tofu from curdling that white cloudy liquid that we've made by grinding and soaking the soybeans. We can make soy protein isolate, TVP, texturized vegetable protein, meat extenders, and a wide variety of other foods that are put into the modern food supply. Archer Daniels Midland, Dow Chemical Company, DuPont, and Monsanto have increased the consumption of soy dramatically in the United States of the past 25 years by simply adding soy protein isolate to most processed foodstuffs. Are most soybeans genetically modified that are grown in the United States? Yes. Are those genetically modified soybeans being used in virtually all processed foods? Yes, they are. Soy, is it healthy for us or isn't it? One of my friends and teachers, Sally Fallon, and her good friend Mary Innig believe fervently that soy is one of the worst foods for human beings on the planet. And perhaps they don't go to extraordinary lengths to avoid eating lecithin, which is found in chocolate bars. Not in chocolate itself, but in prepared chocolate bars. But other than that, I'm pretty sure that they eat very little soy. I follow their lead. I certainly eat miso and tamari on a daily basis. I think that fermented soy is probably a wonder food and certainly one of my hedges against cancer. Miso is one of the few foods, along with tamari, that has been shown to have what's called a straight line relationship with the disease, and that is the more of it that's eaten, the less of that disease we get. Many foods don't have that kind of relationship. We get kind of an improvement in our risk of that disease from eating a certain amount of that food, and eating more of it may or may not change that risk, but miso and tamari certainly do. People often say to me, well, isn't tempeh fermented soy? And I have made tempeh and I have served tempeh here at the Wise Women Center. And the way that you make tempeh is that you introduce a specific mold to soybeans. And you allow those soybeans to mold. Think about what tempeh looks like. It looks like, you're right, moldy soybeans. So when I look at the figures for allergies, what I find is that there are a lot of people on the planet who are allergic to soy. In fact, more people who are allergic to soy than who might be allergic to dairy. And that there are also a lot of people on this planet who are allergic to mold, whether kind of food-grade molds like in tempeh, or creeping black molds from having had your residence flooded. Many people react very strongly to molds. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to take like 2 things that trigger allergies in a lot of people and can combine them to make a food, and a food that's a little iffy because it's a bean. Now, we've been mentioning this all along, that beans are not necessarily kind to the human gut. That beans certainly have to have some tolerance for their ability to create flatulence. So I'm serving tempeh, both store-bought tempeh and homemade tempeh, to people at the Wise Women Center. And what I am seeing, and I do this only for 1 year, and what I see over and over again is people throwing up, people projectile vomiting, people sitting and turning green, people leaving class early. I'm certainly not saying that I did a double-blind study. I'm certainly not saying that my little experience holds true for everybody. But I certainly am saying that tempeh has no place at all in my diet. And I've sold a lot of tofu in my day. I've worked at a lot of health food stores. And I'm remembering an evening meal at an herbalist gathering. I believe it was a Northeast Herbalist Association gathering late in the fall. And it was at a beautiful outdoor center and wonderful food being prepared for us. And one evening for the main meal, we were served beautifully grilled pieces of tofu with portobello mushrooms on top of them. And I looked at it. I just really didn't want to eat the tofu. And so I took the portobello mushroom and I put it on my plate. And when I went back later to get dessert, there was an entire tray of tofu there with all of the portobello mushrooms removed. And I had to laugh. I thought, oh, aren't we sending a strong message to the kitchen? Thank you very much, but we don't want to eat your tofu. So what else about soy? I think of soy as a kind of double agent, or like an undercover, a Mata Hari kind of figure. Soy says, "Oh, I'm so good for you. I have all of these minerals," and yet when we look at studies, we find that women who use so-called soy milk as opposed to real milk don't have healthier bones. As a matter of fact, they might have less healthy bones because soy beverage, as well as tofu, has added calcium. Soy is not that rich in calcium, so it's added to it, and we know that added calcium is one of the things that leads to more broken bones. Similarly, we say, well, isn't soy like anti-cancer? Certainly beans are anti-cancer. This whole Bountiful Beans family is a real anti-cancer family. They are very, very helpful. But as I said, the part that really shines is the miso and the tamari. And as for the rest of the soy foods, the further away they get from the soybean, the worse for our health they seem to be. There is a rather interesting, not necessarily proven set of observations from Japan about soy and breast cancer. And this leans on the understanding that there are actually constituents in soy which tend to promote breast cancer. And if you grow up with soy in your diet, especially tofu, edamame, and the things that are close to the soybean, then when your breasts form, they actually form with a kind of protection against things that trigger breast cancer. And you are thereafter a little less likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer. Almost think back to stories you've read where someone avoided being poisoned by taking a tiny bit of the poison on a daily basis. And that's the thinking here, is that by, frequent exposure to it when you're young, almost daily exposure to it, when you're young, that the breasts actually learn to protect themselves. But if you come to eating soy later in your life, after your breasts are formed, then you're suddenly flooding your system with the components of the soy that tend to promote breast cancer rather than make its diagnosis less likely. Soybeans certainly have been shown to have cholesterol-lowering effects and also to bring down high triglyceride levels. Soy, for this reason, is recommended and highly recommended by people who look at foods and heart health. What is interesting to me is the focus on soy, and I distrust it. I distrust it because of what I said earlier. Who are those people that are seeing to it that we're eating more soy? Archer Daniels, Midland, Dow Chemical Company, DuPont, and Monsanto. Are those the names you think of when you think of corporations and companies that are doing their best to do really well by people and well by the planet? May I humbly suggest that most of us don't at this point. So why soy? Is soy inherently better for the heart than, say, black beans or anasazi beans or pinto beans or white beans? No. The answer is no. Soy is being pushed because soy is being grown. Any beans will do. What we're learning about the bounteous beans and what we're going to learn about chickpeas and fava beans and even red clover and astragalus should help us understand that what we need to do is to get more plants from the bean family in our diets, and that does not necessarily mean soybeans. Let me lean on this once again because my teachers have made it seem really, really important. Soy can be processed in a huge variety of ways. And the further we get from the actual bean, the scarier soy foods become. I cringe now when I remember that I used to buy texturized vegetable protein 5 pounds at a time to feed to my vegetarian family, including my daughter. I hope to be forgiven for not understanding what texturized vegetable protein was and that it is not good for the human organism at all. So, is soy a hype? The answer is absolutely, without a question. Soy is a hype, and it is being hyped, and it is being put in and hidden in a huge number of foods. Go to the supermarket. Go to the aisle where oils are sold. You will note there that vegetable oil is being sold. If you pick it up and read the small print, which might be printed in white on a light background, you will find that vegetable oil means soy oil. Soy oil is usually extracted using a solvent. And of course, the industry assures us that the minute amounts of solvent left in the soy oil, vegetable oil, are not a problem at all. I don't believe them. I prefer an oil that is pressed from the seed rather than an oil that is extracted using solvents. Now, of course, extracted using solvents means that the oil is less expensive. It can be produced in greater quantity, and so we are growing greater and greater quantities of soybeans in addition. Lecithin, that component of soybean that I mentioned before, is a natural emulsifier of fats, and that's part of the way that soy helps to lower cholesterol levels and moderate how our bodies use fats. And that's certainly one of the reasons that a little lecithin is allowable in your chocolate bar, if that's how you prefer to take your herbal medicine chocolate. And you can go back into the archives and listen up to when we were talking about chocolate and how it is one of the foods of longevity. So soy slips herself in there. I think about the 3-year study that was done by the state of Israel when the question of soy came up. And the final recommendation, after basically reading every study that had been done on soy at that point, was that children under the age of 18 should not be fed soy products, that babies should not be fed soy formula, and that even older teens would not necessarily benefit from soy, and that adults could decide for themselves whether or not soy was something that they wanted in their diet. They pointed to studies from Japan showing that anyone in Japan eating a Japanese diet who ate tofu twice a week or more doubled the risk of Alzheimer's. They pointed to studies showing that people who consumed soy beverage were more likely to lose bone mass and to have a broken bone, even if that soy beverage was not fortified with calcium. That those anti-nutritional properties of soy are not rendered unable to be effective by heat treating the soy, as is true with every other bean. So, what else can we say about soybeans? A lot. Phytosterols. So we've been talking about phytosterols off and on. Those precursors to hormones. This is where soy seems to be very different from other beans, and especially from other plants like astragalus and red clover. There are a variety of different types of isoflavones that are found in the bean family. And plants like red clover tend to have the 4 main types that are found. Most beans, in fact, have the 4 main types that are found. Soy has only 2 of the main types that are found and has them in a very high proportion. This may, in fact, be one of the reasons that the information about soy and cancer is so, as I characterized soy before, so two-faced. Helps prevent cancer? No, it increases cancer risk. How can this be? Because the compounds in soy, unlike the compounds in other beans, are not in an inherently safe form. In short, estrogenic substances can be metabolized by a short pathway, which renders them unable to feed cancer, or by a long pathway, which renders them able to feed cancer. And in soy, they tend to be metabolized by that long pathway. Soy was indeed a crucial crop in China long before written records began but not as a food crop, as an aid to soil fertility. The oldest written record that we have refers to an ancient Chinese myth, and this written record was written about 5,000 years ago, and referring to the ancient Chinese myth that there are sacred plants, and that those sacred plants are millet, barley, wheat, rice, and soy. Soybeans didn't come to the United States until the end of the 1700s. In other words, we have been growing soy for a very, very short time in the United States. But in that time, we have come to the forefront in the production of soy, in exporting soy to other places, and into putting soy into the foods of every human being. It makes me wonder about what's going on with the health of Americans when I see that the standard American diet is a high soy diet. When we want to fatten animals up, we feed them corn and soy. And this is what we have been doing to our human population as well. Interestingly enough, most of the peoples of the world eat some kind of grain and some kind of bean as their mainstay protein and don't get fat on them. Is it just soy that does this? Or is it eating products that are ever more removed from the actual soybean? I have this vivid image at being at North River Miso Factory in Massachusetts and seeing the soybeans there. And the soybeans were ready to be crushed. And they put upon their feet organic cotton socks and taped them to their pants, and then another layer of organic cotton socks and taped them to their pants, and got into the vat of soybeans and began to walk, to tread on the soybeans, to push with their feet down into the soybeans and sing. Sing as they tramp the soybeans. And when I eat the miso from North River Miso Company, I remember those feet in the beans, and I remember their singing to the beans, and I remember seeing the big cedar casks out back filled with the fermenting soybeans, slowly, slowly aging and turning into miso, floating on top, tamari, the top liquid. Bountiful, bountiful beans. Soy, is she the queen of beans? She is, but she has two faces. She is healthy and she is also unhealthy. She is being hyped to us, and let us simply take her as a stand-in to remind us that putting more beans in our diet is the way to go. How have you been doing on your beans, Gemini?
I've been doing very well.
Okay, great. So that about does it for this week on soybeans. And we're going to come back next week and talk about chickpeas and fava beans. Until then, green blessings, everyone.
Thank you, Susan. This concludes part 5 of our 8-part series, Bountiful Beans, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.